Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming. My name is Carrie Chen. This is my third year working on my bioscience project, and I'm excited to tell you all about it. I'm from Beijing, and I would like to show you one of my favorite spots back home, the Forbidden City. This is the former Chinese imperial palace from the Ming Dynasty to the end of the Qing Dynasty. It now houses the Palace Museum. Unfortunately, it doesn't always look like this. Once every few months, it can look like this. So, this is not just a foggy or rainy day. The gray color is actually air pollution. On a day like this in Beijing, the government would issue health warnings and recommend the entire population stay inside. Why do people have to avoid air pollution? Well, on a polluted day, the air is full of harmful gases. In addition to these harmful gases, there are also these teeny tiny little solid particles suspended in air, which are called particulate matter 2.5, or PM 2.5. People avoid air pollution because these particles are especially damaging to human health. Let me show you why. That is PM 2.5. Its diameter is only 2.5 micrometers. And this is a grain of sand, which has a diameter that's 20 times bigger than PM 2.5. And this is human hair, which is almost 30 times bigger in diameter than the diameter of PM 2.5. Because PM 2.5 is so small, it can easily be suspended in air, and it can be easily inhaled. It bypasses filtration mechanisms in the nose, enter the lungs, and enter the alveoli. From the alveoli, PM 2.5 can directly diffuse into the bloodstream, circulate throughout the body, and deposit in organs such as the kidneys, the lungs, and the brain. Because inhaling PM 2.5 is so harmful to our health, what are people doing to avoid inhaling it? On polluted days, people can stay inside, where air purification systems are installed. In addition, when people are outside, they can wear these masks. In fact, these masks are called disposable particulate respirators, which are protective devices that filter particles out of air as one inhales. They're usually composed of multiple thick, cloth-like layers, so extra physical effort is required to pull air through all of these layers every single time one inhales. This makes breathing through a respirator feel like breathing with your hands covering your mouth. Researchers have studied the consequences of the increased effort involved in breathing through a respirator in adults. They have found that when adults are exercising while wearing a respirator, their heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure will increase above levels expected for that degree of exertion. In other words, when one is exercising, of course your heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure will increase. However, if you exercise while wearing a respirator, these will increase even more. But are these consequences also seen on these teenagers and children who are also wearing these respirators? We don't know, because no such studies have been conducted on teenagers and children. Therefore, for my bioscience project, I investigated the physiological effects on adolescents of wearing disposable particulate respirators. I looked at 3 physiologic measurements: their heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure. Because inhaling through a respirator requires extra physical effort, I hypothesized that when adolescents wear a respirator while exercising, their heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure will show larger increases than exercising without a respirator. To test my hypothesis, I recruited 21 SSM students free of any respiratory symptoms. Each participant did 2 trials walking at the treadmill, where in one trial they wore a respirator. In the other trial, they did not. At the beginning of each trial, I took their resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure. Afterwards, the participants walked on the treadmill for 20 minutes at the speed of 3 miles per hour. Finally, at the end of each trial, I took their post-exercise heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure. When analyzing my data, I started with heart rate. For the trials wearing the respirator, I calculated the post-exercising heart rate. I calculated the difference between the post-exercising heart rate and the resting heart rate to get the change in heart rate for the trials wearing the respirator. For the trials not wearing the respirators, I did the same calculations to get the change in heart rate for the trials not wearing the respirators. Finally, I did the same things for respiratory rate and blood pressure. This is what I found. For the average change in heart rate, I hypothesized that there will be a larger increase for the trials wearing the respirator. Let me show you my data. For the trials wearing the respirator, the average increase in heart rate, measured in beats per minute, was 20.05. And for the trials not wearing the respirators, the average change was 16.67. From these data, you can see that for the trials wearing the respirator, there seemed to be a larger increase in heart rate. However, is this due to the respirator or is it due to chance? To calculate this, I calculated my p-value. My p-value was 0.06, and this was bigger than the value for it to be statistically significant. So my data for heart rate were not statistically significant. Then I did the same thing for respiratory rate, systolic blood pressure, and diastolic blood pressure. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you every single pieces of my data, but I calculated the p-values, and all of them were bigger than 0.05, which indicates that none of my data were statistically significant. Therefore, I can conclude that there were insufficient statistical evidence to support my hypotheses. In addition, any differences seen between the two groups were probably due to random chance. What can I do with this information? Well, it seems like that wearing respirators appears to have minimal physiological effects on adolescents for at least 20 minutes of moderate exercise. However, there are definitely improvements that I can make. Number one, I could always recruit more participants. Secondly, the subjects only walked on the treadmill for 20 minutes. Perhaps that wasn't long enough for the effects to be seen. Finally, I counted the respiratory rate visually, so those might have been inaccurate. So I need to find some new methods for measuring the respiratory rate. With regard to future studies, since my data seem to indicate that it is safe for adolescents to wear respirators, I believe that it would be okay to study the physiological effects on wearing disposable respirators on children. In addition, with that information, I can use that information to design respirators specifically for children. Thank you for listening.